I don't particularly like debating politics in the best of times. And so I try to keep politics out of my hobbies, including tabletop wargaming. But I'm currently in a situation where politics is directly impacting my tabletop wargaming experience. And no, it's got nothing to do with Nazis. Well, not directly.
The most prominent recent political issue in wargaming seems to be about female Adeptus Custodes representing modern diversity politics, and before that, Games Workshop's explicit rejection of fascism and Nazis. This is all in Warhammer, because Warhammer is the most prominent wargame, and therefore gets the most attention and audience reach. However, other wargames do exist, and in the genre of historical wargaming, the thing which many people care about, of course, there is the ever-present political controversy of Nazis. Again. And they say there's no crossovers in Warhammer and historicals. However, not to downplay anyone's political controversy of choice, I'm sure they're all very important, but what are the actual impacts of these? Has anyone lost their job because they were screaming that female custodies were not true to the law? Oh shit, that's not true to the law! We have to burn down your village now! Or even just supporting fascists. Like, what's actually happened? Did some guy go out to a tournament or something and go like, I support fascism? And then he wasn't allowed to play, and then he went home with zero repercussions? Did that happen? Oh, that actually did happen. Only the organizers didn't care. And when people refused to play him, he got awarded wins by default. Oh, there you go. Oh, it happened again! But this guy got kicked out. Both times were in Spain. What is it with Spain? Maybe if you like fascism, you should just move to Spain. I don't know. Okay, but these are isolated incidents with individuals who haven't had their livelihoods threatened. The event I'm covering today involves around 20 people that have been working towards a historical wargaming project for around 5 years at this point, and has had multiple players pull out, that's what she said, because they feel their jobs and social lives will be threatened if they participate in a wargame. How do I know about this? Because I'm a part of it. Not a part of the threats, I mean, I'm part of the wargame. And I'm also not part of an implied polyamorous intimate relationship in reference to that's what she said. I don't know any Bonnie Blue-esque figures, much to my eternal regret. This video will be divided into sections. Part 1 will be about the importance of politics in everyday life and how politics fits into wargaming. Part 2 is a broad context overview of Sino-Japanese relations, fun. And Part 3 will be the story of how the political controversy happened and my personal thoughts on it. Part 1. The importance of politics in everyday life and how politics fits into wargaming. I don't like thinking about politics at the best of times. However, I do think that politics is important because understanding and utilizing the mechanisms by which power is attained and kept is crucial for one's well-being in society. Perhaps not on a day-to-day level for the average person, but broad macro decisions of your government can be literally life-changing. So it's important to keep up to date. While I think it's beneficial to have a broad understanding to navigate society, I don't think it's good to generally talk about it. I think theoretically there is nothing inherently wrong with discussing politics, and in an ideal world we would all just examine various systems of governance and society without bias, and logically find the best policies and outcomes. In fact, theoretically, I think that it would be better to talk about politics, other than many other topics, because we could find understanding and consideration on the mechanisms by which society exists. But in a practical sense, just like discussing religion or money, people get very emotional about it, because they tie their identity to different factions, and a disagreement on a factional stance becomes a disagreement with one's personal identity by association. It's just the primal instinct for tribalism in a postmodern world. You can easily damage interpersonal relations when discussing politics, because everyone is just insane and a bunch of crybabies. Avoiding the controversial elements of political discussion falls under the broad skill set of interpersonal politics, or just maintaining good relations with most people, even if they're insane. Now, you might not think that you need to make friends with a bunch of insane people, but you'd be wrong, because in a workplace, you will interact with all kinds of insane people, most of them in senior management. And a time-proven strategy for succeeding in this cutthroat, ruthless world is to placate and maintain good relations with powerful people. Like the police and your mother. Can you live a life without compromise and only speak the truth? Theoretically, maybe, but not really in any practical sense. What are you gonna do? Live in the woods without internet and no friends because you can't agree to disagree? That's insane. You could argue that at times your values should come before compromise, and that's definitely true in a case-by-case basis. If your friends want to go pull a Viking and go ping and pillaging, maybe some part of you wants to go, hey fellas, should we debate the moral, social, and logistical quandaries of not doing that? But generally, social situations aren't that extreme. Well, maybe not for you. Generally, it's not a good idea to piss people off for no reason. But it's also important to develop one's understanding of society. And discussion of ideas, including politics, can be important for that. So, like many issues in life, you might have to find a good middle point between these two stances. Of course, I know many people who couldn't navigate a social situation with tact or subtlety to save their lives. Guys, this is a wargaming video. Let's be real, some people here don't even leave the house. So generally, and for the people who don't leave the house, I think it's just safer to not bring it up. I'm just saying. So a basic sense of politics and politicking, how to manage your relations, understanding socio-economic policies, and knowing not to piss people off for no reason is beneficial. But how does that fit into wargaming? Much like politics itself, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with having politics in wargaming, and everything in existence is to some degree of some political field or issue. Obviously, you can try to avoid it, but some wars are immensely politicized, and it's difficult to avoid that if you're wargaming that conflict. Let's say you're wargaming the Israel-Palestinian conflict. I don't know why you're doing that, but okay, let's say that's what's happening. I can already tell people are listening very closely now. Well, what did you just say about Israel and Palestine? Now, you could theoretically just wargame it with zero political commentary. You could set up the children and women on one side and your choice of armed opposition on the other side. See what I did there? I didn't name the sides. You know why? Because I'm smart. Play out the scenario with zero emotion. You could do that. But we all know in reality, someone, probably me, is going to start talking shit, and before you know it, suddenly it gets really tense, and as the emotional level rises over a long enough time period, the chance of someone saying something really racist approaches 1, which is the concept of the law of large numbers. Saying something like and or ing, fun stuff like that. The chance of damaging interpersonal relations between disagreeing participants is usually higher if wargaming a politically controversial topic. I think wargaming is a medium for social interaction, and therefore the same principles of interaction apply. If you introduce politics into it, depending on the subject matter, you risk damaging relations in case of disagreement. There is the argument that people should have the freedom to depict political topics in a controversial fashion if they wish, but invite the consequences of doing so in these instances. This argument believes that people have freedom of action, but every action creates a reaction and subsequent consequences. There is a counter-argument that depicting controversial political topics can normalize or promote harmful ideologies and intimidate or offend certain people or groups. Some symbols and ideologies within armies represent violent ideals of conquest, colonialism, resource extraction, sadism, murder, or any number of unpleasant characteristics. These armies, ideologies, and representative actions may be from real-life history, completely fictional, or anything in between. Are depicting these armies offensive to some people? It can be. Should people therefore not depict these armies, and does intention matter? If the depiction is to deliberately cause offense versus the desire to depict an immoral faction faithfully according to its history or fictional lore, I think the question is, what is more important? Freedom of expression or minimization of offense and harmful ideologies? I don't think there is a universally agreed upon answer for these questions, and different people value these concepts to different degrees. I know that sounds like a cop-out, but it's true. It's a difficult question without an easy answer. I think if one is interested in politics and wargaming, then considering these questions and deciding upon one's own position on them is important on the depiction of politically controversial topics in wargaming. However, I will say politics in the wargaming medium seem more premeditated because of the immense work and preparation needed for it. A political opinion expressed in miniature form requires conceptualizing probably real, but possibly figurative, metaphorical, or abstract ideas and realizing them into reinterpreted ideas of units, and then sourcing miniatures, modifying them, and painting them to represent this political opinion. That is a lot of work. So you probably really super believe this idea if you're making it into a miniature army, or just super dedicated to upsetting people. Fellas, there's faster ways to get punched in the mouth. Just go to a bar and start talking shit to any group of guys. You want to choose the groups which are slightly younger and don't have girls in them, because they're less restrained and probably more sexually frustrated, which will manifest as greater repressed anger and therefore increased killing power. I wonder if playing Warhammer would increase or decrease your killing power. On one hand, you'd have no money for combat lessons, but on the other, the subsequent rage would lend strength to your every blow. So I'd say it's about even. If you don't want to die, maybe don't do this in America. I don't know, your particular context will vary. Part 2. Sino-Japanese relations. So now that I've covered my broad thoughts on politics in general and how they fit into wargaming, I wish to detail the specific context I find myself in, and which everyone else finds themselves in, because this is like a global context. So we're all in this together, really. Yeah. This situation is navigating China-Japan relations for a multiplayer game set in the Sengoku Jidai, but physically taking place in China. Now, on a thematic note, I think it would be cool to play a game set in Sengoku Japan physically within Japan, but that's not what's happening. So, yeah. I first joined the group chat to organize this game in July 2021. So planning has been going on for years. We organized a date to meet up, and then the global pandemic happened, and we all stayed inside our houses for like a year. It was a weird year. And finally, I thought we were going to get to Wargame. And then, not really out of the blue, because there have been Chinese-Japanese tensions for a while, like a couple of thousand years. But out of the blue in terms of wargaming, the game has been postponed because of these tensions. In order for my narrative to have meaning, I think I need to provide a very general context of negative Japanese-Chinese relations. I'm not going to cover it in any depth because there are better creators out there with a better historical and political understanding, and the scope of this video doesn't include an in-depth examination of the issues. I'm not a historian or a political analyst. I paint toys on the internet, okay? I won't get everything right. Like I said at the literal beginning, I don't like thinking about politics, and also everyone I know who obsesses about politics is miserable. I don't know why, and this is anecdotal, but they all seem to be just unhappy, and I don't want that for my life. But this has changed my travel plans, and it's worth talking about, so I want to just talk about it and then stop thinking about it. In a very broad and quick overview, Chinese grievances with Japan are that Japan invaded China in World War II, killed millions of people and committed atrocities, that Japanese war criminals in the Japanese government from World War II were allowed to keep ruling, formed the LDP, which still rules Japan, the perception that Japanese figures deny Japanese war crimes from World War II, and perceptions that apologies for war crimes from government figures being insincere and being retracted years later. In a very broad and quick overview, Japanese grievances with China are the perceptions that the Chinese government's propaganda and actions are hostile to Japan, that the Chinese government is authoritarian and suppresses the freedom of Chinese people, and that Chinese tourists are impolite. I don't think it's my place to comment on the legitimacy of these grievances, nor offer solutions. I'm not a political figure, and these issues are complex and larger than I am. There is nothing funny about these issues. But I do kind of find the contrast between the alleged direct offenses committed against the other country kind of funny. I don't like you because your tourists come over and are loud. Oh shit, you win this one. Well, I don't like you because you invaded my country and killed millions of civilians, including babies, and allegedly conducted human experiments like dissecting people when they were alive. Allegedly. Nah, but loud tourists, that's clearly worse. Goddamn, you got me. I just got served. Recent issues in the context of the organization of this scheduled event have worsened relations between Japan and China. The 2025 to 2026 China-Japan diplomatic crisis is ongoing, where the Japanese PM said that a Chinese attack on Taiwan could potentially constitute and existential crisis could justify military intervention. China believes Taiwan to be Chinese territory under its One China policy, and the statements have been interpreted as a challenge to this policy, with the Chinese government demanding a retraction, which never happened. So the current sentiment between the two ethno-states is not good. Now, I'm not going to go into this further because I'm not an expert on the politics, and I don't want to be. I don't want to be one of those permanently online guys who talk shit about other people on the internet. It just doesn't seem like a productive existence. I do feel a responsibility to make a case for empathy and measured discussion for everyone. Like I said, I'm not an expert, but I am talking about ridiculously charged topics. There's many different ways to do it. I could be offensive, I could try to be funny, I could try to be measured and neutral as possible. And I've tried to do the latter in this case. Look, regardless of the relations between nation states, I do not think an individual should just be defined by their ethnicity or culture, and the actions of their government and society do not necessarily define them either. I believe that widespread labeling or associations across tribal groups is a generalization which we apply for convenience, but does not account for the nuance or the complexity of human beings. I can't believe I'm talking about this on a wargaming channel, but here we are. I think we really need to try to listen to each other and try not to be mean. Try to act in good faith. Yeah, alright, you can win an argument with bad faith posturing, but is that really the goal? Is that really winning? What are you winning? Have you made money? Do you get points for arguing online? Or have you made the world a slightly shittier place, starting fights rather than trying to resolve them? Let's try to create good times for everyone in our own small way. Part 3. The controversy of our multiplayer Sengoku period Japanese wargame. Alright, so with that out of the way, with the broader geopolitical context hanging over this story like a great host of rain clouds, I can cover my story, and I can be offensive in this segment because it's my own personal story. I'm going to have to censor names and dates and things for the interest of protecting people's privacy, so parts of this will look like the Epstein files. But I can guarantee that there are no kids involved in this story in any way, which is ironic because there's so many toys involved. But the kids are banned. We're wargamers. We have never planned for kids. So anyways, I had the army prepared. I've been painting these Japanese troops for years, which is very fitting for a Japanese work ethic, now that I think about it. It's exactly what the Japanese would do. Remember, this all started in 2021, and for the past couple of years, after starting a Chosun Korean army, I've basically been painting only Japanese troops. There was a halfway mark parade where you had to show a minimum number of 60 figures ready by December 2024, and a full parade with a minimum of 120 figures in June 2025. This is a hard requirement. Like, the organizers have kicked people out of the group chat for not completing enough models on time. 190 models? Not good enough. Get out of the group. Now, I paint really slowly. I'm more into the creative rather than the gaming side of the hobby. So I'm interested in theming and aesthetics and making a cool force. And so I put a lot of time and thought into my miniatures. My wife complains about it all the time. I'm the kind of guy that will paint the eyes, but also the lips of my models because there is a noticeable transition of color between the face and the lips. Yes, I was socialized as a child. A few years ago, I dated a girl who told me that other people had told her that she had the largest areolas they had ever seen. Areolas are the pigmented skin surrounding your nipples. But I never noticed, but I did notice the lips of my miniatures. I know where my priorities are. Apparently, she met a guy who was like, "Your areolas are so big! They're the biggest areolas I've ever seen!" And she had to Google what areolas were afterwards, and so did I actually. This was a learning moment for me. But at the time, she was like, "Please don't hurt me. I'll do whatever you want." And I was like, does this happen a lot to you? And I don't remember the response, only that the skin tonal difference on lips can be picked out on miniatures. So I'm doing all this work, and I have to stress this, but this has taken years of my life. Like, my life has changed because of the Japanese. I mean the fictional representation of the Japanese in figure form, not actual Japan. I'm hiding in my basement, highlighting clothes and blending lighting effects on armor, while other people are out there having sex all the time. People are bonking. I don't know if it's recreational or a job. There's a lot more applicants nowadays with the creator economy, but I'm too busy with my noble purpose. I tell myself as a single tear runs down my cheek. Sometimes people ask what it is I do since I'm not bonking, and I describe it, and then they go like, oh, so like Warhammer, and I have to explain, no, not like Warhammer, because this pulls from historical conflicts and figures, blah, 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 blah. Almost no one cares. Not even Warhammer people care. Because they care about like Space Marines, and these aren't Space Marines. Not that popularity matters. The most important thing for a hobby is you enjoy the hobby. And I don't even enjoy it because of how difficult it is. So I don't know what I'm doing. It's rewarding, but it's not always enjoyable. Just don't do what I do. Play video games or something. Now, I have to be honest, when I started this project, I didn't think I was going to follow through and actually try to go to China. And the reason was I was afraid of the Chinese government. Now, don't get me wrong, I am still afraid of the Chinese government. I'm afraid of most governments actually, because they have more soldiers than I do, and their soldiers are real. But I had this idea that they could just grab you off the street and put you in jail. I haven't even done anything other than the 6 murders like 3 years ago. But I grew up in the West, in countries like Gondor and Rohan, and for the longest time, various English-speaking media has demonized China and, emphasized how there's no freedom and stuff. So I thought if I went, it'd be straight to jail. Like the flight lands and the police are just waiting there with the complimentary cuffs and van, and like, oh, I didn't know I would get such attentive customer service. And they're like, yeah, no, we just jail everyone who lands here. It's just straight to jail for the whole flight. Like all 800 of you. I eventually did go and nothing happened. Like I ate food, saw some tourist stuff, and then I flew home. I eventually realized that the idea that the Chinese government would just abduct tourists out of sheer evil and ignore the diplomatic implications of that out of evilness was insane. I mean, people probably do get abducted, but there are probably reasons. Like they tried to exercise free speech or something, Like they don't just send all the tourists to work camps by default. So anyways, I thought I would never go. I just joined the Samurai group chat in 2021 because I thought it'd be a way to get access to exclusive models. Like the Chinese have their own markets, and I'd find out about special models that the West would not know about. You know how Byzantine monks smuggled out silkworm eggs to break the Chinese and Iranian monopoly on the silk trade in the 5th century? It was kind of like that, but for models. I actually have learned a bit about Chinese model markets and their local sculpts. I'm going to let you in on a secret, if you promise not to tell nobody. It turns out Chinese manufacturers make a lot of miniatures about Chinese topics actually. You know why? It's because they're racist. But I like diverse models just because I like to see different models. It doesn't have to be Chinese specifically. Like if Bosnia had a thriving historical miniature scene, I try to get into their chats too. I don't see color when it comes to models. Only gray. Too much gray, actually. Like years of backlog. I'm starting to have storage issues. After a few years of group participants posting and talking about Japanese armies, I decided that it seemed like a pretty cool activity to participate in. And by cool, I mean incredibly uncool by the standards of most human beings. But how often do you get to play a big multiplayer game like this? It was originally going to be held in Beijing, so it'd be a popular city that would be easy to get to, and there would be other things to do as well. And as long as the government didn't send you straight to jail from the plane, there would be other things to do as well. I think you could maybe organize a big Warhammer game with more ease, but then you'd have to play Warhammer. Organizing a large historical battle means you need to get everyone to agree on using the same scale, with forces from the same time period and plausible geographic proximity. I've been playing historical miniatures for a while. I have literally never met another person who collects Sengoku period Japanese in 1/72nd scale in real life. Or any scale, really. I feel like I'm part of a cult or something. This is what it must feel like to be involved in Warhammer. It seemed like a rare opportunity that had been building up for years, and I'd eventually worked out the Chinese government didn't just jail tourists on sight. I had always wanted a reason to start painting samurai and had always been intimidated by how much detail historical armors, and by extension, miniature replicas of these had. If I had a goal to work towards of a multiplayer game, it gave me another layer of incentive. Since painting all the chords and lighting effects on Sengoku Japanese was the hobby equivalent of brain damage, I really needed any incentive I could get. My first completed historical army was a Celtic army, and it's really like baby's first army. All you have to do is paint bare flesh and basic clothes. Sure, you can put plaid and tartan patterns on, but you don't have to. A Sengoku Japanese army has mandatory armor cords all over the place, and they're tiny and fiddly. Nothing is mandatory really, but the cords are a core component of the model. You can't just ignore them, or the model is unfinished. But if you don't ignore them, you go insane and depressed from the effort of painting them. This is where the idiom between a rock and a hard place comes in. There is a reason that Warhammer doesn't have an equivalent Nippon faction. It's because armor cords are iconic for the Japanese, and so they're mandatory for a Warhammer interpretation, but they are so hard to paint, they will make you cry. Can't have the kids cry, they won't buy more models. But I kept at it. It was very difficult. I spend a lot of time on each model. I eventually finished enough models to participate, and I have to say, it wasn't worth it. I regret starting this hobby. No one cares about historical wargaming. There's no money in it. All the money that exists in the space is in Warhammer and Trench Crusade. It's too time intensive, and it's a regressive hobby, out of touch with the times of modern electronic gaming. It's like buying a horse now when everyone has a car. Well, I have my stupid horse in this race now, and I have to get it to the finish line. God, I'm so stupid. What am I doing? I should have become a Games Workshop shill. Unfortunately, I have this dumb horse which I've taken on the highway, and the cars are zooming past me, just ignoring me. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I have to take a flight to Beijing to play this game that I've been working towards for like 5 years. Originally, 40 people pledged to give this a go, and 22 people ended up following through and pledging their banners to the game. That's about what I expected. It's like when people host events, if people say they'll go, about half will actually show up. That's just life. And then it happens. Big China news. Big China. Big China swinging between the knees. Oh Lord, it's China. It's China time. Holy shit. China. On September the 3rd, 2025, China was to mark the 80th anniversary of its victory in the Chinese people's war of resistance against Japanese aggression and World War II, with a massive military parade in Beijing. Now, apparently, everyone already knew it was the 80th anniversary early in the year because people know how to count to 80. I mean, the locals knew it was happening, but I guess it wasn't just a big deal yet. But as a big anniversary of Big China beating out the invaders, China came closer, people started to get their jimmies in a twist. The commander of the Northern Army gave a prepared speech in July 2025.
Considering that this year marks a grand national commemoration of the War of Resistance against Japan, it seems that tackling the subject of Japan's warring states period is indeed sensitive under the current circumstances, and it would be best to postpone it until next year. At the beginning of the year, the government hadn't yet mentioned large-scale commemorative events, but it was only after May that the government's promotional efforts intensified. And these efforts are also related to the current Sino-Japanese and Sino-American relations. It seems that it would be best to avoid the current situation.
Well, biscuits. I was shocked. I had spent years painting these stupid toys for this silly game, which in a postmodern interpretation was as stupid as anything else, so you might as well commit wholeheartedly to the absurdism, and then the game was going to be delayed for the Japanese. Now, to provide context, I've had a Western upbringing, and I speak the Queen's very own, or as my classmates used to call it, speak the ing. Japan has never been a problem for me. Maybe for my ancestors, and definitely for my dating life, but not for me. But now the whole country constituted an existential crisis for this game. He continued.
Moreover, even if the event were to be held in another city, there is still a risk of negative public reactions. Postponing it until next year would allow everyone to prepare more thoroughly. As for the weather, April or May or September or October next year would be ideal, so we should discuss this further. It was recommended to steer clear of the situation and avoid being caught up in the prevailing public discourse.
It's better to err on the side of caution and try not to give anyone an excuse to take advantage of you.
October as a whole is the special protection period. What's most concerning is that they might be easily slandered and falsely accused by those with malicious intentions, and the label of pro-Japan might be slapped on them.
I find this interesting. You can see that there are different cultural values according to different contexts. I suppose if you live in China and you get labeled as pro-Japanese, it must be a death sentence. Not a physical one, a social one. so it's exactly like being a wargamer. It's interesting because the English language world idealizes Japan so much, and over in China, it seems like getting labeled as pro-Japanese is one of the worst things that could happen to you. Almost as bad as being called a wargamer. With a bit of further discussion, the overall commander of the Southern Coalition agreed, and so that confirmed the delay for all. I believe that the concerns raised by the Northern General and the other members of the War Game Room are justified. After all, this is merely for entertainment purposes, and there should be no risk for one's job or career involved. Therefore, I fully support postponing the event to next year.
Discussions about the Warring States period have always been free of issues, but this year is indeed special.
I had a couple of months to live my life and potentially paint more troops, but I've painted so many Japanese troops that I felt justified in taking a break. Also, things were happening in real life. Without going into it, I had a depressing few months where I was asked to be a groomsman for my wedding, but also other things happened which were sad. I don't want to talk about it because I was raised in a culture where it was impermissible to express any emotion other than indifference or homicidal rage. Anyway, real life was busy, and I was expecting the game to get pushed back to next year, which was fine. I didn't make a video about it because nothing new had been confirmed, so what would I even cover? Yeah, the game has been moved and might be cancelled, but we don't know yet. See you guys next time on the video, on some level, I regretted making the prior Samurai Parade video. I should have known that you don't cover an event until it happens because random bullshit can always happen. But I've been working on this project for like 5 years. I put so much time into it. I thought it deserved some kind of coverage. Anyway, so the whole thing was in limbo until further updates, which was fine by me. My real life was quite busy. Then, in mid-January 2026, out of nowhere, the Northern General had come up with a revolutionary idea.
To all fellow enthusiasts, given the complex international situation and the unprecedented changes of the past century, organizing a purely Japanese Warring States-themed event could easily lead to misunderstandings. It is suggested that the theme be changed to the Battle of Baitai Pavilion. Translation error. Byokjigan. The Ming army can be provided in part by the those with their own Ming army can bring them along. Please, let us know what you think.
I think what you're saying is unrealistic. It lacks practicality. What everyone is doing is primarily focused on the Warring States period. The general of the Southern Army finally weighed in, swinging between the knees. This matter seems to be somewhat different from what you previously discussed with me. Originally, it was stated that due to circumstances, there would be some Ming soldiers present at the gathering, and the Beijing side would also prepare some items for photography. Our activities would primarily follow the format of the previous Warring States era gatherings. There were other gatherings, I wasn't invited. While the external narrative would unify around the Battle of BT Pavilion, Byokjae-gwan, against the Japanese invaders. And the Northern General's statement about changing the topic directly, the Warring States period is merely a small-scale simulation, focused primarily on the Battle of Byokjae-gwan. This is somewhat unexpected. If it's simply used as a shield to avoid trouble, I would see no problem with that. But when the underlying essence changes entirely, it's surely difficult to know what to say. Originally, the gathering was defined as a gathering of like-minded individuals, and there was no issues with publicizing it externally. It was akin to hosting a dinner party at home, inviting friends from all directions to come over and chat. The theme was Japanese Warring States period. There was no need for publicizing or worrying about Sino-Japanese relations. Simply put, there was no inherent need for publicizing in the first place. At most, one might take photos and share them in model enthusiast groups or post about it on forums. I wonder if doing so could lead to any problems. However, I'm not entirely sure about your situation and the impact on your life in Beijing, so I think it would be difficult, and yet you come up with a very practical solution to address the issue. I am certainly willing to support you, but it would not involve changing the actual content to a major battle against the Japanese. On one hand, this differs from the original idea of gathering with everyone. On the other hand, the realistic model does not allow for it. To me, this seemed to be an issue of optics. The Northern Coalition feared appearing pro-Japanese. The Southern Coalition believed that no appearances was necessary and that coverage could be limited. The Beijing locals believed there could be a genuine impact on their lives if word got out, and are willing to question an event they had worked on for 5 years. I wouldn't mind changing the overall battle to be the Ming Dynasty fighting the Sengoku daimyo, but the Southern commander wanted to preserve the original spirit of the event. I am reminded of Nick Cave's work, One More Time with Feeling. Quote, "Most of us don't want to change really. I mean, why should we? What we want is modifications on the original model. We keep on being ourselves, but just hopefully better versions of ourselves. But what happens when an event occurs that is so catastrophic that you just change? You change from the known person to the unknown person." End quote. In this case, the catastrophe was Sino-Japanese relations. And what a catastrophe it was. The entire nature of our event was changing. Again, I didn't mind that, but I was concerned that the whole thing would be called off. And sure enough, at the very end of January,
As the event date approaches, it was a moment of great joy and anticipation. However, due to the current tense situation and circumstances, as well as the impact this has had on some members of participating in the event, after consultation among the participants of the it has been suggested that the event be postponed. If there are any differing opinions or suggestions, they are welcome to be discussed. This is hereby notified.
I'd like to understand first, what does it mean by event being postponed, and until when?
The exact date of the postponement cannot be guaranteed at this time due to the current political situation.
And with that, hope died. It was all over now. I didn't have to fly to Beijing with models in my carry-on luggage. Oh no, please don't cancel the event. The rebellion began. It began with whispers about starting their own event, with blackjack and hookers. Then the banners began to gather into a new group chat. I really liked that there was a parallel to the historical Sengoku Jedi, as new coalitions formed based on political agreements and people pledging their soldiers to the new cause. It was, to use the Japanese expression, the last fart of the weasel. I like that expression. The book, Mao's Last Dancer, adapts this idiom into a captivating story of the triumph of the individual, despite difficult economic and political constraints, and in similar fashion, we have adapted this idiom to play with toy soldiers. The once Southern commander announced, "Gentlemen, this is the second time that Beijing has requested a postponement. Recently, there have indeed been some developments which I have not disclosed to everyone. However, it seems that there are significant internal issues within the Beijing leading to disagreements regarding the organization of events. I think it's not desirable if things continue to be delayed indefinitely. So what if we hold a gathering in Chongqing in Although the venue conditions might not be ideal, it would be better than continually postponing this matter and failing to complete it." Chongqing? Well, that was unexpected. It sounds like the second most racist name you could come up with. It's literally the inverse of Ching Chong. But it's a real city. I was open and ready to go to Chongqing. I also think that some people in Beijing might be part of the civil service system and are afraid of being affected. I have no problem with it being held in Chongqing. Please provide details about the itinerary and dates, as well as the names of those who can participate in the wargaming session. Let's discuss this together. Well, basically what it means in Beijing is that if Sino-Japanese relations do not normalize, they might not even be able to participate in events, let alone host them. So it seems that they are indeed facing difficulties. While I understand this, it's quite hard for me to imagine the strong connection between model building and politics. Nonetheless, I have started to mobilize some relevant resources, hoping that the event can still be held as scheduled in. However, the scale or venue may not meet expectations. Please bear with us. After all, Beijing is a place where political factors do indeed play a significant role. After all, there are ticket restrictions for this event, otherwise it would be unfair for those who genuinely want to participate and complete the tasks. The main issue is that even if the event is postponed, they cannot determine when the postponement will occur. If this event continues to be delayed without a clear date for the gathering, I believe it would be better to not hold it at all. That's why I suggested changing the venue. Last time I also asked everyone about their intentions regarding the event in There was quite a bit of agreement. Of course, if everyone wants to postpone it, I personally could accept that as well. This statement represents a shift from implicit to explicit language from the Northern General. In reality, due to the fact that it wasn't just him, every major figure in had their forces already prepared. Additionally, he had been quite active in the group chats beforehand. There simply couldn't have been any reason for him to refuse holding the event. Therefore, I believe that Beijing must be facing greater pressures than we had anticipated. However, there really wasn't much reason to keep postponing the gathering. The event had been planned since around the end of 2019 and was initially intended to run over 3 years. Unfortunately, it encountered the pandemic from the start of 2020, resulting in a 2-year delay from the onset. Initially, I promised everyone that we would hold a gathering 3 years after I returned to Chongqing. The events were scheduled to take place from mid-2022 to September 2025. The timeline aligns with our current plan. However, last September, the event was postponed due to the celebratory atmosphere surrounding the National Day holiday. If this time the postponement is due to the tensions between China and Japan, it's difficult to predict when the event will actually take place. Although I believe that the woman will step down in Japan's elections on February 7th, the policy towards Japan might also be part of the effort to reclaim Taiwan by the motherland. So it's unclear whether this atmosphere will continue to have an impact. In that case, let's plan to change our location for playing with our miniature soldiers. If the situation suddenly evolves after the new year and Beijing suddenly feels that there's no problem, then we can stick with the original location as well. Spoiler alert, the Japanese PM Takaichi Sanai did not step down and also won the election in a landslide. The situation was not going to evolve. It was just going to stay really tense, like in a marriage where the parents stay together for the kids. I know a lot about this, trust me.
At this point, what's needed no longer depends on a single person or a single statement.
Well, that does sound like a mature and prudent plan. Let's start with Chongqing first. We'll see what the next steps are. If not all members of the participate, that would mean a quarter reduction in the number of participants.
The gathering event, which was previously scheduled to take place in Chongqing from to this year, will still proceed as planned. The specific details of the event schedule will be announced in the group chat at that time.
It seems that the event will be held in Chongqing, and Beijing has withdrawn from the activities. This time, the organizer will be solely the puppeteer, meaning the southern overall commander. Holding the event in Chongqing would indeed be much more convenient for the 3 Chongqing players. As for my availability, there should be no issues. Due to the change in location, it will be necessary to confirm whether other players will participate based on the puppeteer's private arrangements.
And here we are. It appears that the game will take place at house, where we will be in her. This is the prelude for what may happen, and I hope I don't have to make a future video saying it was all cancelled after all this effort, but I think it will happen. I wish politics didn't affect things. I don't like thinking about it. I don't like the tribalism of it. I don't want to get involved, but sometimes things involve you regardless, and then you have to deal with that shit. I walk the road to Chongqing now, where the other banners await to decide the fate of Sengoku Japan in an alternative historical fiction setting. Join me next time in The Road to Chongqing, Part 3. I want to thank my Patreon supporters, The Command Bunker, Mikhail Belusov, and Cream of the Meme. Thank you again for gathering your banners. It's very cool of you.
So there you have it. That's the current timeline of events. So I still hope that the event will be held maybe in Chongqing, but I don't really know. That's a current update. Politics is unavoidable. It's impacting all of us at the moment. I mean, if we look at everything and the current state of the world, but I was hoping that it wouldn't have to impact this, one of my last joys, but what can you do? What can you do?